He had lost everything, every mansion, every car, every stock, every last piece of the empire he had spent 3 decades building, within one violent, merciless night. Reporters camped outside his gates. Investors cursed his name, enemies celebrated, friends vanished, and somewhere between a ruined fortune and a collapsing reputation, Alexander Rourke realized that the world didn't just want to see him fall, it wanted to see him disappear. What none of them knew was that the final key to his redemption, the one thing that could save him, came from the most unlikely person in his entire skyscraper, the quiet, overlooked janitor who worked the night shift. A man no one remembered by name. A man they barely noticed existed. But that moment, when the janitor stepped forward and said, "Sir, you forgot this one paper," that moment would split Alexander's life into a before and an after. Because that one paper wasn't trash. It was salvation, and almost no one alive would believe what was written on it. The world, however, wouldn't hear that part until much later. For now, Alexander stood on the marble floor of his penthouse, staring out at a city that once bowed to him but now screamed for his downfall. He felt the heaviness of 1,000 headlines pressing against the glass. He could almost read them in the night sky. Billionaire Rourke loses fortune overnight. Rourke empire collapses, fraud or mismanagement. From richest man to ruin in 12 hours. He closed his eyes. The silence inside the penthouse felt as loud as thunder. Hours earlier, he had everything. A technology empire that shaped the world, a net worth that made governments curtsy, and a reputation as the untouchable king of innovation. But it had taken only one catastrophic lawsuit, one accusation pushed by hidden enemies, to undo a lifetime of brilliance. His accounts were frozen, his shares seized, his board turned against him. And tomorrow morning, the world would learn the final blow: he was officially bankrupt. He had tried to fight it. He had used every lawyer, every contact, every backup plan. But he had been outplayed. And now, for the first time in 30 years, he was alone. Truly alone. The distant sound of a vacuum cleaner echoed through the corridor outside. At first, he ignored it. The noise belonged to the building's night janitor, the same man who arrived every midnight with the slow, unhurried steps of someone who had nothing left to lose and nothing left to prove. The janitor, Alex remembered vaguely, had worked in the building since long before he bought it. He had gray hair, tired shoulders, and the quiet patience of someone who cleaned floors no billionaire ever bothered to walk on. Alexander had never spoken to him. Tonight, though, the footsteps grew closer. A soft knock broke the silence. Alexander didn't turn. The penthouse is closed. No cleaning tonight. There was a brief pause. "Sir," the janitor said, his voice gentle but firm, "I believe you forgot something." Alexander almost laughed. Forgot something. He had forgotten entire continents of assets today. What difference would one object make? "I'm not in the mood," he said, rubbing his temples. But the janitor didn't leave. "I think you'll want to see it," he said. "I found it in your office. It was on the floor. I wasn't sure if it was trash." Something in the man's tone, respectful, hesitant, but certain, made Alexander finally turn around. The janitor stood just inside the doorway, holding a single folded sheet of paper. A completely ordinary-looking page. Something about that felt strange. Everything in Alexander's world existed in vaults, safes, fireproof cabinets, encrypted servers. A loose paper lying on the floor almost didn't make sense. "What is it?" Alexander asked, stepping closer. "I don't know, sir," the janitor said. "But it looked important. I didn't want it thrown away." The janitor extended the page. Alexander took it. A jolt went through him. He recognized the handwriting immediately, his own. And the insignia at the top, his personal confidential seal, used only on the rarest internal documents. He unfolded it slowly. Read the first paragraph. And felt the blood drain from his face. It wasn't just important. It was the most valuable sheet of paper he had ever written. It was, though he had forgotten it existed, the last surviving copy of what analysts had once called the most revolutionary intellectual patent of the decade. A patent that hadn't been released yet. A patent that could rebuild his empire. A patent worth billions. "If this is what I think it is," he whispered. "It must have fallen from your briefcase," the janitor said softly. "Normally I never touch anything on your desk, but something told me this one was special." Alexander sank into a chair, gripping the page like a drowning man clinging to a floating plank. This was no ordinary patent. This was the blueprint for the Eclipse algorithm, a quantum-based predictive engine that could outthink every AI on the planet. A model he had spent 6 years perfecting in private, a model he planned to unveil when the world was ready. But then the lawsuits hit. The seizures. The betrayal from his board. And in the chaos, he had forgotten about it. This was his ticket back. His redemption. Maybe even his revenge. But then another realization struck him like lightning. If the board, or the lawyers, found out he still possessed this document before the bankruptcy proceedings ended, they could seize it too. They could argue it was part of his assets. They could lock it away forever. He looked at the janitor, this quiet, tired man holding a mop. "Why did you bring this to me?" Alexander asked, unable to hide the emotion in his voice. The janitor shrugged. "Because it was yours, sir. And because no one deserves to lose everything." Those words pierced deeper than any lawsuit. For the first time that night, Alexander felt something other than despair. He felt a spark. A beginning. "You may have just saved my life," he said quietly. "I just saved a piece of paper," the janitor replied. "The life part is up to you." Alexander stared at the document. The idea forming in his mind was reckless. Dangerous. Potentially illegal if mishandled. But if he didn't act now, his future would be buried in the rubble of tonight's destruction. He stood. "Follow me," he said. The janitor blinked. "Sir, there's something I need to check." They walked to his private office. Once the heart of his empire, polished steel, glowing screens, glass walls overlooking the city, it now felt like a tomb. He opened his encrypted cabinet. Empty. Completely. His former partners had been thorough. But they hadn't found this. The last surviving copy. He looked at the janitor again. "Tell me your name." "Daniel," the man said. "Well, Daniel," Alexander said, "it seems the universe chose you tonight." Daniel smiled faintly. The universe chooses strange ways to speak. Alexander sat down at the desk. "Daniel, I need your help. And if you're willing, your silence." Daniel nodded without hesitation. "You have both, sir." Alexander spread the paper carefully on the desk. "This algorithm," he said, "could change everything." "For you?" Daniel asked. "For the world." Daniel studied Alexander quietly for a long moment, then spoke in a way no one had dared speak to Alexander Rourke in years. "Then the world should see it, when it's ready. Not when greedy men want to steal it." A slow, unexpected smile crossed Alexander's face. It was the first real smile he'd felt in months. That night, the billionaire and the janitor sat in the quiet, empty skyscraper as the city slept. And while the world believed Alexander Rourke's empire had burned to ashes, he began sketching plans across the desk, rebuilding strategies, new pathways, new alliances. All while Daniel quietly emptied wastebaskets and wiped the counters, listening, offering occasional bits of humble, grounded wisdom that no advisor on Alexander's payroll had ever dared share. And as the first light of dawn touched the skyline, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The kind that comes only after destruction. The kind that doesn't rise from money or power. But from the unexpected hand of a man no one ever saw. Not yet. But they would. Soon. Very soon. The sun rose over the city like a warning shot, painting the horizon a fiery red, fitting for the day Alexander Rourke's world expected him to walk into his own professional funeral. Reporters swarmed the sidewalks below, waiting like vultures for the official bankruptcy declaration at 9 a.m. But inside the penthouse, the billionaire was not preparing to surrender. He was preparing to strike. The patent lay open on the desk. Daniel stood nearby, hands folded, as Alexander reviewed the algorithm for the first time in over a year. With every line he read, every notation, every symbol, he felt the old fire stirring inside him. The world had taken everything from him, but it had forgotten one thing. Genius cannot be repossessed. He straightened, pushing the paper gently forward. "This changes everything." Daniel nodded. "Then we need to protect it." The word "we" felt strange to Alexander. In his old life, there had never been a "we." There were only employees, negotiators, lawyers, shareholders. But Daniel's presence had grounded the chaos inside him. "You said something last night," Alexander said. "That no one deserves to lose everything. Why did you say that?" Daniel leaned on the broom handle. "Because I did." That silenced Alexander. Daniel took a slow breath. 10 years ago, I owned a small mechanic shop. I wasn't rich, but I worked hard. One day a developer bought the entire block. They offered me nothing. Said I didn't fit their vision. I sued, but I couldn't fight their lawyers. Lost my shop. Lost my savings. Lost everything except this job. Alexander felt a heaviness settle in his chest. I'm sorry. Daniel shrugged. You learn to start again with whatever life leaves you. Alexander studied him, this man who had endured the same type of destruction, yet stood here without bitterness or revenge. Just steady compassion. When you brought me that paper, Alexander said slowly, you gave me what no one else did, another chance. Daniel smiled. Everyone deserves one. Alexander folded the patent and slipped it inside a protective sleeve. Daniel, I want to hire you. Not as a janitor. As an assistant. Someone I can trust. Daniel blinked. Sir, I've cleaned floors my whole life. And you saved my future, Alexander interrupted. That makes you more qualified than half my old board. A quiet laugh escaped Daniel. Well, if you truly want my help, sir, then I'll do what I can. Alexander extended his hand. Daniel shook it. The partnership began. At 8:15 a.m., Alexander left the penthouse through a private exit. Reporters screamed from the street, cameras flashing like lightning. Mr. Rourke, are you bankrupt? Did you hide assets? Is this the end of the Rourke empire? He ignored them. Inside the courthouse, his former partners sat in polished suits, whispering with smug satisfaction. They expected him beaten. They expected him broken. They expected a man with nothing left. They did not expect a man holding the most valuable intellectual asset in the world. Judge Halberg cleared his throat. Mr. Rourke, these proceedings will finalize your bankruptcy. Do you have any statements? Alexander stood. Yes, he said calmly. I do. A hush fell over the room. He removed the protective sleeve. Gasps spread like wildfire. His former board members paled. They knew what they were looking at, even from across the room. They recognized the insignia. They recognized the structure. The Eclipse algorithm. The one innovation they had been searching for, desperate to seize, believing it had been destroyed or erased. But Alexander still had it. And that meant one thing. They had no legal right to his new technology unless it had been filed before the bankruptcy. Which it had not. The judge adjusted her glasses. Mr. Rourke, is this what I think it is? Yes, Your Honor, Alexander said. A pending patent. One that was never submitted, never disclosed, and never included in corporate assets. It is wholly personal intellectual property. The courtroom erupted. His enemies stood up, shouting protests. This is impossible. He hid it. That belongs to the company. It belongs to me, Alexander said sharply, because I created it alone, before my company even existed. Silence. Pure, stunned silence. Judge Halberg raised a hand. If what you're saying is true, Mr. Rourke, then no entity may seize it, freeze it, or lay claim to it. She paused. Do you intend to use this patent to re-enter the market? A smile touched Alexander's lips. I intend, he said, to revolutionize it. The judge nodded. Then, legally, you are free to do so. The gavel struck. Alexander Rourke was bankrupt, but not defeated. Not even close. Outside the courthouse, the press bombarded him with questions. His former partners attempted to approach him, offering frantic, desperate apologies, trying to salvage their connections. He ignored every single one of them. Daniel was waiting by a bench, holding 2 coffees. You survived, Daniel said, handing him one. More than survived, Alexander said. Now we build. Where do we start? Daniel asked. Alexander looked out over the city, the same city that had once crowned him king and then tried to bury him. From the bottom, he said. With people who understand what it means to lose everything. Daniel nodded. I know a few. We'll build a team, Alexander said. A real one. People overlooked. People underestimated. People with fire. And what about the algorithm? Daniel asked. Alexander tapped the protective sleeve. It stays with us. We'll refine it, train it, test it, and when it's ready, launch it publicly. Daniel hesitated. Sir, people will try to steal it. They can try, Alexander said with a smirk. But we'll be 3 steps ahead. They began walking. But halfway down the street, Daniel stopped. Sir, why are you doing this? He asked. What do you mean? Most billionaires would run to another island, hide their money, retire. But you're ready to fight again. Alexander's expression softened. When you lose everything, he said, you see the truth. And what truth is that? Daniel asked. That money isn't power. Innovation is. And the only people who change the world are the ones who know what it feels like to break. Daniel took that in silently. Alexander continued, I had fame, fortune, teams of advisors, but the person who saved me was you. A man my world would have ignored. Daniel's throat tightened. Anyone would have done the same. No, Alexander said. No, they wouldn't. And that was the moment Daniel realized something deeper. Alexander didn't just want to rebuild a company. He wanted to rebuild himself, but not as the man he had been. As someone better. Over the next months, they worked in a rented warehouse, bare floors, folding tables, second-hand computers. No marble, no glass walls, no gold, just grit and brilliance. Together they assembled a small team, ex-factory workers, laid-off engineers, 2 single mothers with coding backgrounds, a former teacher, a student who couldn't afford tuition. People who had talent but no opportunities. People like Daniel. People Alexander had once never seen. Now he saw them all. And they worked with a passion Alexander hadn't seen in his glossy corporate towers. Because this wasn't just a job. This was a resurrection. The Eclipse algorithm evolved, gaining capabilities other companies couldn't dream of. Predictions, modeling, optimization, real-time learning. It was a leap forward, not a step. The world began to whisper. Is Rourke coming back? Does he have something new? Rumors swirled. Investors knocked. Alexander didn't open the door. Not yet. He waited until the algorithm was perfect, fluid, unstoppable, magnificent. And when the day finally came, he chose not a luxury conference hall, not a Forbes stage, not a high-profile expo. He chose the rooftop of the warehouse. His team gathered behind him. Daniel stood at his side. And facing a sea of reporters who once celebrated his fall, Alexander Rourke spoke. You thought I lost everything. But you were wrong. I only lost the things that never mattered. What matters is this. He unveiled the Eclipse algorithm. The world erupted. That night, headlines didn't mock him, they worshipped him. Rourke returns with world-changing innovation. The greatest comeback in tech history. The Eclipse algorithm redefines the future. And when the first checks arrived, hundreds of millions in licensing offers, Alexander did something no one expected. He gave Daniel a share. A large one. Daniel froze. Sir, I can't accept this. You earned it. I cleaned floors. You saved my life. Daniel swallowed hard, eyes stinging. Then, thank you, sir. No, Alexander said, smiling. Thank you, Daniel. The world now knew Alexander Rourke had risen again. But what the world didn't know, what it may never truly understand, was that the foundation of the greatest comeback in modern history was one janitor who picked up a single forgotten paper and chose to believe it wasn't trash, but destiny.